A little less than 2 years ago, I built my first serious desktop PC. For that build, I chose what was, at the time, the most powerful GPU available, the GTX 980 Ti. Since then, I've acquired the Acer X34, which needs every bit of power possible to hit its 100Hz limit in newer AAA games. After seeing real-world benchmarks of the 1080, I wasn't compelled to upgrade, so I had been patiently waiting ever since for the Ti version. I also made one grave mistake with my original build, a mistake that my ears have been paying for. You see, I bought a reference 980 Ti with the intention of doing water cooling later on. That never happened, so I've been living with a loud, hot GPU for 2 years. The EVGA SC2, which is the specific card that I have, and the FTW3 are essentially the same card, with the only difference being the amount and size of fans. They both come with ICX, which includes 9 temperature sensors. In practice, they're pretty much useless for the average person, and taking into account how limited Pascal overclocks are, I don't even see how a hardcore user could get much use out of them either. The only issue is that you have to use EVGA's Precision X software to even see those temperatures, and I found that software to be outright inferior to MSI's Afterburner, which I almost immediately switched back to. The on-screen display on Precision X is just terrible, and doesn't even come close to reaching the levels of customizability that Afterburner does. Physically, it's one of the most inoffensive card designs in its class, being completely devoid of any gamer insignias, MSI dragons, or bright red coloring. The modern art-esque faceplate, which, however shiny and metallic looking it may be, is actually plastic, might not be everyone's favorite, but aside from the reference card, it's as neutral as you're going to get. The only LEDs on the entire card are the lettering on the side, which simply reads EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. The best part of the SC2 is how the fans work. They're independent, with one for the chip itself and the other for the memory. I have opened up my case just to check the GPU out, and I have actually seen one fan spinning while the other was not, so it does work as advertised without any user configuration. Speaking of the fans turning off, that is something that this card does while in idle, which is somewhat of a standard feature these days for higher-end custom coolers, but something that I never experienced with my old reference card. While playing a game like Battlefield 1, the fans are all but silent, but with a game like Prey, I was hearing them just a little bit. The card was never offensively loud and was usually inaudible. Battlefield 1 was yielding temps around 61 degrees Celsius, with the limit being around 72 to 73 degrees Celsius in seemingly more demanding AAA single-player games. I benchmarked only 2 games, and not in the most scientifically sound way, seeing as I'm comparing a reference card to a card with a high-end custom cooler. However, the numbers do seem to confirm what I've seen on websites dedicated to the matter. With Shadow of Mordor, you can see that the minimum frame rate of the 1080 Ti is only 3 frames less than the average frame rate of the 980 Ti. With the Gears of War 4 benchmark, there are some sizable gains as well. While the 1440p ultra-wide frame rates are a lot better on the 1080 Ti, the game felt great when I played it last year at that resolution on the 980 Ti. With 4K, it's a different story. 35 frames per second is not a good gaming experience, but by turning down some settings such as anti-aliasing that are less necessary at 4K, the 1080 Ti could easily reach that 60 FPS mark consistently. That brings us to the most important point. Is the 1080 Ti worth the hefty price tag it demands, particularly if you're coming from the 980 Ti? In my case, I would mostly say yes. Some games I had played last year, like Doom and Battlefield 1, were fine, but let's just say I'm happy I had a G-Sync monitor when I played them back then. Now I can run both of those games maxed out, almost constantly hitting the 100Hz limit of my monitor, which for a multiplayer game like Battlefield 1 has notably improved my experience. At the same time, this isn't a mind-blowing upgrade, it's more just a feeling of satisfaction that I now have a card that can keep up with my monitor without turning down the settings. This is precisely why I would only recommend this card for very specific people with very specific monitors and use cases. Before I even discuss resolutions, for those who are not interested in playing the latest and most demanding AAA games, this card is completely unnecessary. I've constructed a chart here that breaks down what I feel is the appropriate card for common resolutions and refresh rates. You might notice that I'm not including the 1080 in this, and that's for a very intentional reason. Even after the price drop down to $500, I still find the 1080 to be a terrible value that makes little to no sense right now. If you want the best value, you'd go for the $400 1070 no question, so the 1080 is for someone who wants performance and doesn't care about price. That makes no sense either. If you would benefit from the marginal step up to the 1080 from the 1070 and don't care about value, wouldn't you massively benefit from the step up to the 1080 Ti as well? Maybe I'm the only one who thinks this, but the 1080 is just in a weird place right now and I don't recommend it at all. I don't think anyone would argue with me about the monitors in the 1070/980 Ti column. The 980 Ti and by extension the 1070 are perfect for 60Hz 1440p and 1080p ultra-wide, and maybe just a tad overkill for 144Hz 1080p. In the 1080 Ti column, we of course have 4K, which the 1080 Ti can certainly do, but not on every game, and you're still going to be turning down a few settings. That's just reality right now. Just like how the 980 Ti was marketed as a 4K card and ended up being more of a killer card for 1440p, the 1080 Ti shines the best on high refresh rate 1440p or the ultra-wide Acer X34 that I have. For 4K users, I suspect that the 1080 Ti will still be a card that you only hold on to until Nvidia drops the inevitable 1180 in the next year or so. If you have any questions about the SC2 or just the 1080 Ti in general, feel free to ask down below, and thank you for watching.